I have several questions for you. First question is, should you be insulted if someone calls you an ambivert? Question number 2, by 2017, who's going to be spending more on technology? The CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, or the Chief Information Officer? And the last question is, native advertising is indigenous to what country? The answers to these questions were given throughout the Legal Marketing Association conference last week, and I know a lot of you could not make it, so I'm very glad that you could join us this morning. My name's Sharon Berman. My company is Berbay Marketing and Public Relations, and we create the visibility and credibility that fuel revenue growth. Okay, the Legal Marketing Association conference last week, held in San Diego. Amazing that anybody could attend any of the sessions because it was right on the water and the weather was just gorgeous, but everybody was inside listening very attentively. Okay, 30th anniversary, 1,300, at least 1,300 people, which was the highest attendance they've ever had. 400, at least 400 first-timers, which sort of underscores, not sort of, it does underscore the fact that the economy has gotten a lot better. The figure I heard was that people came from 17 countries. I know I heard a lot of Australian accents, I heard Latin accents, so it seems that people were drawn from all over the world for this. A couple other things. One figure that they cited was the fact that this is the 30th anniversary conference and that 1/3 of the attendees had not been born at the time of the first conference, which is an interesting statistic. Also, about 85% of the attendees came from law firms that have 100 or more lawyers. Now, in general, that is not our client base, and I know for a lot of you listening, you're not 100 lawyers, a lot of you are a lot less. So in terms of choosing which sessions I attended, I really tried to focus on those that I thought would be most interesting to people listening today, and who would be most, and also because most of you are the kind of clients that we work with. So that, I want to keep that in mind. A lot of the content had to do with larger firms, and I really tried to focus on what made sense for firms that were less than 100 lawyers. Okay. The keynote session was given by Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink went to law school. As he said, he was not very successful. I don't think he graduated. I know he never practiced. But he at least had the context of what it means to be a lawyer, the kind of education, the kind of mindset. And he is the author of the 2 books. One is Drive, and the other is To Sell is Human, which is really what he focused on in this session. His session was called Leadership and the New Principles of Influence. He started out citing a survey where they asked people what their first impression was, what the first thing was that they thought of when somebody said the word sales and or marketing. And 4 to 1, people had negative impressions. He used words like slimy, smarmy, manipulative, aggressive. And it also the visual that came to mind was overwhelmingly male. So he was saying, okay, why is this? Why is this that we have the opinion, or we think of used car salespeople when we think of sales, and the related word marketing? He was saying that this view is archaic, and it comes from the fact that it used to be a world of information asymmetry, meaning the seller had all of the information. The seller knew how much it cost, how long it took to get done, what the profit margin would be, and really that's what created the world of buyer beware. But today, that's really changed. He was saying that information asymmetry is really archaic. And today, the seller is on notice, that the buyer has the information. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this. If you've gone to buy a car, you could walk into the dealership and know, how much dealers in the area or throughout the state or country were charging for this car, what the trade-in value was. So it's the buyer who has the information today. And it used to be that the buyer can't talk back, and today we can all talk back. He was also saying that no one teaches sales. even in some of the business schools today, they may teach sales education, but we're not taught how to sell. And he was talking about how the world has changed. And what has changed is the things that we need to be a good business generator today, to be successful at that, are what he has as his ABCs. One is attunement, B is buoyancy, and C is clarity. And he was saying that today we don't have a lot of coercive power. We really can't force people to do things. And our power to coerce, so to say, really comes from attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. Okay. So, attunement. What does attunement mean? Attunement means getting out of your own way and seeing things from the other's perspective. He was using the example, if you're in a law firm, if you're an administrator, if you're staff, if you're a marketer, and your internal clients are lawyers, can you see that? Can you see things from their perspective? And can you see things from not only the lawyer's perspective, but also the lawyer's client's perspective? So it's about being attuned. And he was also saying that the more powerful people feel, the less attuned they are. And that's why a lot of times it's the staff who, because theoretically maybe lower on the totem pole, they're the ones who are more attuned to people and can see things from another's perspective. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. And so he was saying the job for the lawyer is to see things from the client's perspective. That they must be attuned if they're going to be good business generators today. Okay, buoyancy. Buoyancy is a subject near and dear to my heart. Maybe some of you listened at the end of last year. We did a seminar, a webinar on from rejection to resiliency. How do you bounce back from rejection? And by the way, that webinar, if you're interested, is on our website, and we're going to be issuing a white paper within the next month on the same subject. Okay, buoyancy. Buoyancy is how you move from rejection to resiliency. How do you bounce back? How do you remain able to keep going? And the more your business is persuasion, which lawyers' business is persuading people, the more open you are to rejection. So that's one thing. So lawyers face rejection, and study after study shows that they are not well equipped to deal with it. That's their natural tendency is not to be buoyant. So what do they need to do? One of the things he was talking about is being active, taking an active role in, let's say, preparation. Not, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, which is the self-talk that we have, and not that we shouldn't have that self-talk, but he was using the example of better self-talk would be, how can I do this? Like he used the example of when he was walking out on stage in front of 1,300 people. You could say, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, but the better thing is to say, how can I do this? How can I do this? Should I smile more? Do I need to make more eye contact? How can I do this? And that's to be, you're more active that way, more engaged. The other thing is to explain failures not in personal terms, but in less personal terms. In terms of these things happen, it's not the end of the world, I'll be able to get up and go on, so to really depersonalize it as much as possible. But the key is that we have to be buoyant if we're going to be successful business generators. Okay, and clarity. Talking about information, it used to be that some people had access to proprietary databases. I don't know if some of you remember the dialogue databases, and you subscribed to that and you had a world of information, but that's not the case anymore. Everybody has access to information. So today the key is curating that information, pulling out what's important and being able to analyze that, communicate it, and discuss the implications. One thing he was talking about, too, is that because a lot of professionals, including lawyers, don't like the word sales, that they're not in sales, they'll call themselves problem solvers. And in his opinion, the world doesn't need problem solvers not anymore, but problem solvers, because people have so much information, they know what the problem is when they come in. What they need is somebody who can help them identify a problem, or who can help anticipate the problems, which is really what lawyers do. And so it's not so much problem solving today, but identifying, anticipating, and making sure that you can avoid the roadblocks that are coming up. So those were his ABCs of being a successful business generator. And he also had some tips in terms of selling. He was saying we're bombarded with so much information that today, if you have the choice between thinking about what the other person is thinking or thinking about what they're feeling, we should be thinking about what they're thinking. And that's the stronger way to come about it, where a lot of us would think, oh, really, it's the emotional intelligence, I really need to be in tune with what they're feeling, but we can't be doing both, so that we really should be thinking about what they're thinking in terms of attunement and perspective. He also talked about different studies in terms of who was better at sales, introverts or extroverts. A lot of us would like to say, okay, well, it's a surprising result, it's introverts, but it's not. Really, by a small margin, it was extroverts. But really, who did the best were, and the answer to question number one, are ambiverts. Ambiverts, and most of us are ambiverts, have both qualities, the introverted quality and the extroverted quality. Most of us are a mix. And that's the kind of person who's going to really do well in sales or do better than introverts and extroverts. Also, he mentioned that ambivert is not a new term. It's been used since the 1920s in sociology, so it's not just something he made up. He also talked about, if you've ever taken a sales class, or you're taught in sales a lot of times to mimic the other person's body language or their gestures or that sort of thing. And a lot of us would like to think that that's really ridiculous and that doesn't make any sense, and you know, it's something that a used car salesperson does, but he was citing studies where they found that indeed we are humans and we do mimic people, and so that to a certain extent mimicking is effective, but you need to do it subtly. You don't want to come across as idiotic, and that more importantly, you need to be using the language that people are using. So you don't want to be using legalese. You want to be talking in language they're using, and that can be very, very effective. And he was also talking about all of this comes down to the fact that we're not trying to change people's minds. What we're trying to do is make it easier for them to act. As he said, you were trying to get people on the off-ramp. So that was really the gist of what he had to say. Very, very interesting. I think people were very were held enthralled through most of his presentation. Okay. I'll be back with you in 1 minute. Next session that I attended was called The Technology Horizon, Technologies to Keep Your Marketing Relevant. Adam Stock, Chief Marketing Officer and Client Services Officer at Allen Matkins. Adam has an unusual background for a marketer because he came up through information systems and computers, and he was a techie. So he really has a handle on this and really has quite a vision when it comes to technology and marketing. Okay, and what he was talking about is the fact that by 2017, it is going to be the Chief Marketing Officer who's going to outspend the Chief Information Officer on technology, and that's based on a study from the Gartner Group. As we all know, most marketers, administrators, lawyers did not study technology, but because it's becoming increasingly important, we all need to be aware of it, we all need to be thinking about it and thinking about how it can help us be more effective at what we do. In fact, he was saying that his marketing department just hired a programmer, and there was another firm there that said they already had 3 programmers in their marketing department. So that's the way we're all moving. He talked about a technology strategy, and really, no matter what size firm you are, whether you're 3 lawyers or 35 or 3,500, you want to be thinking about your technology strategy. What is the world going to look like in 3 to 5 years? What kind of technology are you going to need? And because these are big items, big in terms of relative to budgets, and just because they take a while to implement, we really need to be thinking about that now and planning for how we're going to be incorporating this technology. So starting out, it takes time to implement, and talked about how, similar to what Dan Pink was saying, it's information. We all have information. How do we get the insight from that information, and how do we translate that into action? Okay, some of the things that Adam had to say. Vendors should be your friends. We all get calls from vendors wanting to introduce us to different technologies, do demonstrations, that sort of thing. And he was saying that we really need to listen to a lot of them, pick out the ones that we think are good, and go into deeper conversations, and so that we can learn, know what the options are. I know we're all busy. I know it's, like, when am I supposed to do that? But we need to be thinking about the ones that make sense, that we need to be learning about a little more, and also saying to them, once you've decided that's something you're interested in, okay, I'll try it for a month. We want to have a free month trial or a 90-day trial or whatever. Okay, talked about long tail and niche marketing. Again, a subject near and dear to our heart. Last month's webinar was on, or the month before that was on switching to a niche. What research is showing today that a lot of companies are selling more of products they don't really focus on, in a sense, that they have in their product line or their service line, but they really don't focus on promoting. And because today long-tail searches are so much more prevalent, long-tail searches meaning much more descriptive, as opposed to business lawyer. It might be business lawyer specializing in FCPA litigation or whatever, but our searches are very descriptive, and therefore they take us down deeper into the web and surfacing products and services that may not be the most prominent for the company selling them. And so one of the things he was saying is that you really want to be thinking about setting up a web page for even those practice areas or service lines that you might not be really focusing on, or that might just be a real niche area, but that it doesn't really, you can get a web page up pretty quickly, and that it makes a lot of sense for a low cost to have you be able to be found. Okay, responsive design. I'm sure you've all heard the term, and meaning no matter what device you're on, your viewing experience is going to be similar. Not that you're going to have to, if you're on a desktop and you're looking at the same thing on your iPhone, it's going to be, you're not going to have mouse type. It's going to be sized to fit the iPhone just as it is sized to fit the desktop. So we all know how important that is. And once again, and I think today is the day that Google is introducing its new algorithm, where mobile-friendly sites are going to come to the top of or have much more priority when it comes to search engine rankings. So we want to be keeping that in mind. And marketing automation. Marketing automation is a very broad term, and basically means automating your marketing communication programs. It's when you're clicking on one thing and then it takes you to another page, and then it might, depending on what you're clicking on, it might take you to a Facebook page, or it might take you to a LinkedIn page, depending, but it's pulling you through the marketing pipeline, just as this little dog is pulling our prospect through the pipeline. So some of those programs are Market To and Pardot. Just to give you some examples. But marketing automation is becoming increasingly important, and there are programs out there for that you don't have to be a huge firm to use them. Okay. Adam talked about a couple other things in terms of generational bifurcation, that those who are 35 and younger in general are looking at their social media pages twice a day at least, and those who are older are looking at them a lot less than that. So we need to be tailoring our messages for different markets. We all know younger, older, but in terms of, he was using one example was Goodwin Procter's Facebook page, tailoring that was a softer page for a younger generation, and was talking about things that you might not find on a page that was tailored for its other client base. He was also saying, and I thought this was very interesting and really worth thinking about, that the results of a survey showed that people who manage large law firms are 8 to 10 years older than the CEOs of the NASDAQ companies that they're targeting. It's a very, very interesting stat. Talking about big data, and the big data being a lot, we all have, all of the law firms, every firm has data that it's not using. It's collecting a lot of data. It's in terms of timing, tracking, profitability, a lot of data that's not being used, and that's going to be more and more important. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that firms, the fact that firms have a lot of data that they aren't using, and also talked about data degradation, that 20 to 25% every year in your database is becoming, your database, your mailing list, your distribution list, your Outlook is becoming outdated. And he talked about some of the programs that are available to help keep that updated. One of the most important things he talked about, and this has to do with marketing automation, and is critical no matter what size firm you are, in terms of you need to get your systems talking to each other. Your financial system needs to be talking to your marketing system and your prospect tracking system and all of that, that a lot of times systems aren't talking to each other. And I know that we find this a lot with the firms we talk with, that they may have two more than adequate systems, but they're not talking to each other, and therefore you're losing a lot of value. So those are things to be thinking about. Okay, I'll be back with you in 2 seconds. Next panel, very well attended, of course, General Counsel panel. How we buy what you sell and how that's changing. This was moderated by somebody from the Association of Corporate Counsel, and the General Counsel came from Petco. She's been with the firm 10 years. Somebody from Care Fusion, a major healthcare company, and the General Counsel of 3M. They talked about strategic insourcing. That the 3M attorney was saying that 3 years ago, 2/3 of their work was outsourced, and now 2/3 of it's insourced. It's done in-house. And how did they do that? They did that by increasing the sophistication of the lawyers that they have in-house. For example, bringing in more lawyers who have M&A expertise and other sophisticated areas. And he says this trend is just going to continue, and it's increasing the pressure on outside counsel to differentiate themselves. So I think that's a very valuable point in terms of differentiation becoming more and more important. Talked about the role of procurement and the fact that even the outside law firms hate to hear that they're going to have to work with procurement in terms of pitching, in terms of RFPs, and all of the panelists also said that in-house people shiver when they hear that they're going to have to work with procurement, but it's not going to go away, and that it's an education process for them in terms of being in-house. They have to educate the procurement department about how purchasing a legal service differs from other products they might be working with. And the woman from Petco was emphasizing the fact that it's really important that law firms understand the ownership structure of the firms that they're pitching. In terms of, she was saying, I guess they have, they're partially owned by private equity, and was talking about the fact that a lot of firms today that you might be pitching are owned by private equity firms, and that they're going to be leveraging their buying power more through the procurement process. Maybe having one centralized procurement department doing the purchasing for all the firms they own. But she was saying it's very interesting, very important to understand the ownership of the firms that you're going after as prospects. Also talked about, I think it was a 3M person who said they don't want to call it alternative C agreements, but they thought it was more business-like, and they thought it made their in-house lawyers think more in business terms if they called these custom fee arrangements. And was saying how they were citing a lawyer in a big firm who said that she prefers so much more when she works with clients on a custom fee arrangement, because it makes her feel more like the team, part of the team. She's not thinking about the billable hour all the time, but that there is still such an education process in terms of outside law firms educating their prospective clients about the possibility of alternate fee arrangements, how it might work, what the benefits can be. And so we're going to see more to come. Talked also about convergence, which basically is whittling down the number of law firms. 3M was saying that they used to have 165 law firms they worked with, and now they have 39. The RFP went out to incumbents, and it also went out to what they consider firms that either had the values they have or were value firms. By value firms, I meant that the firms did not have a Manhattan address, so they might be Midwest firms or other firms. And also talked about the fact that they needed to demonstrate and reflect the values of the firms they were pitching in terms of pro bono or diversity. And the woman from Petco was saying when she went out, she was whittling down the number of firms, she went to NAMWOLF, an organization that some of you might know, which is the National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms. And that was very important for her, that she gave them the opportunity to pitch. Okay, so of course the question everybody had is how can we get in front of you? How could, if we weren't on the list that received that RFP, how can we become part of the team here? Once again, time and attention. The lawyers are saying, the in-house lawyers are saying, okay, I need your time and attention. One way is in-house MCLEs. This we frequently hear cited as a way to get in front of in-house counsel in terms of propose an MCLE and that you can come to my office and do something that's going to be really a hot topic, that it's usually very well appreciated. Also talk about spend a day with us, volunteer to come spend a day with us, no charge, but that really makes a difference. They all emphasized the relationship continuity, and they said the fact that keep your employees, keep your lawyers, because if you're an outside law firm and there's a lot of churning and they have to keep dealing with different lawyers, it's really upsetting to them. It causes them a lot more work. And so relationship continuity with outside lawyers is very, very important. Know when good is good enough. They're saying that's what they really value with the firms, is that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to look into every nook and cranny every time. This tailoring was something that the Petco woman mentioned in terms of she appreciates being able to select the kinds of material she receives from her law firms, not just getting everything, but being able to choose. And very interesting was that the person from Care Fusion and the general counsel from 3M both said that they get most of their industry information through Twitter, which was very, very interesting. Okay. Next session, developing an ownership mindset, techniques for engaging partners to drive a business development culture. This was put on by David Freeman of Freeman Consulting, and they had Tom Turner, who is the managing partner of Procopio in San Diego, and Kurt Kickleiter, the managing partner of McKenna Long and Aldrich. Okay, they talked about the fact that it's up to management to get your owners, your partners, to be active and to participate. That make sure that you outline and you're clear in terms of what ownership means. Put together, a list similar to a mission statement. This is what it means to be an owner and a partner. David Freeman was saying that a person's relationship with their manager is the key determinant in their performance, and that this is all about coaching to keep your lawyers happy and coaching them to keep their people happy. And that when people are happy, you can measure that in terms of profitability. Excuse me. So that owners and the management, those managing owners, need to consistently communicate what ownership means. And that what you're coaching them to do is it's not punitive, it's not more work, but it's really, look, I want you to find the inspiration that's going to help you get where you want to go. Okay. So it's up to firm management to make sure that partners take an active role in the business. They need to be talking to partners about this on an ongoing basis, asking things, for example, when did you last take an associate to lunch? How did you actually get that client? What are we doing to increase client loyalty? So it's up to the owners or for management to really keep this topic at the forefront. And that one of the most important tools in this is internal PR, that successes should be promoted, small successes should be promoted often. Don't wait for that big bang, but be promoting those small successes along the way, and that recognition is a tremendous tool in terms of driving behavior. And that they talked about training, and there was a lot of talk in different sessions about training, and there's no definitive way to do this. It's really a trial and error and what works best for your firm. It's also what different things work for different lawyers. So does coaching work best for those who really need it, those who don't need it, or those in the middle? And this consensus is that coaching works best for those in the middle. Forget those. If people don't want it, they're not interested, forget it. Don't waste your time. And it's an allocation of resources. If people who really, are doing really well and your big rainmakers want coaching, it's a decision about, do we give them more resources or do we allocate those to people in the middle who might be able to improve their performance, devoting more time and effort to that? Should they have skin in the game? Should they pay, should they be asked to pay for part of their coaching? And there's again no definitive answer. It depends on the lawyer, it depends on the firm. And also, very important, don't forget staff training, because staff spends a lot of time interacting with clients. So you want to make sure that they are also trained. Okay, so just a couple other things in terms of rounding up. Native advertising. Native advertising, what country is this indigenous to? Well, native advertising is really advertising that follows the form and the function. It looks exactly like the material that it's embedded in. You've all looked at it. You have an example here. We've all seen it. You're reading things and you don't realize until maybe afterwards that, hey, that was sponsored content or promoted content. But today that's called native advertising. And it's done because today people want to learn about products and services through content. They don't want traditional advertising. So it's more engaging. It tends to go viral more often. It tends to be shared more often. And the session that talked about native advertising, which I wasn't available to sit through the whole thing, but one of the things I did hear that really made an impression on me was the fact that when you're thinking about your new branding or your logo or whatever, you want to think digital first. You don't want to be thinking, how's this going to look on my business card? That would come next, but you want to be thinking, how's it going to look on the website? How's it going to look in an email signature? How's it going to look on Facebook? That's what you want to be thinking of first today, not how's it going to look on the envelope. Okay. Another lesson learned, just comments made during sessions, is that a lot of times practice group leaders really have no idea what their job is. They're made practice group leader and nobody's saying what's expected of them, what their accountability is. Is it just feeding their ego? So you want to really think about for your practice group leaders, do they know what they're supposed to do? LinkedIn, a couple things that came up about LinkedIn during the conference was Adam Stock, in terms of the technology session, he thinks that LinkedIn is going to be like the lawyer's online store, and showed a page from Amazon and a page from LinkedIn and the similarities between how really LinkedIn is going to be an online store for lawyers. So once again, the importance of LinkedIn. Also, there was a session on client satisfaction, and one of in the interviews, what happened is they were interviewing a client, and the client said, you know what, I went to refer your firm to another company, and I visited the lawyer's LinkedIn, but it didn't show the kind of work that you're doing for me that I wanted to tell this other firm about. And I couldn't refer him to the LinkedIn because it didn't show what I was trying to say. So the lesson being, You want to make sure that your LinkedIn is updated often. They were saying once a year. I really think you should be visiting your LinkedIn, once every other month, once a quarter at a minimum, and making sure it's updated. So those are just a roundup of some of the things that came up in the conference. There were a lot of sessions. It's impossible to get to everything, but definitely worthwhile. And so you can mark your calendars for next year. Next year, the conference is going to be April 11th through 13th. It's going to be in Austin, Texas. More information will be coming out probably not in the not-too-distant future. Other conferences that you might be interested in, the Legal Marketing Association has a special interest group. They call it P3. It has to do with pricing, project management. I went to the conference not last year but the year before. It tends to be geared to big firms, but because it's talking about pricing and project management, there is a lot of food for thought. You might want to be thinking about this in Chicago. And it piggybacks, right, June 9th and 10th, and then the afternoon right after that, the Legal Sales and Service Rain Dance Conference. Legal Sales and Service, also known as LASSO, has been putting on this conference for 10 or 11 years. Very worthwhile. Nice because it's a lot smaller than the marketing conference, LMA. LMA is has a different vibe. They're both worthwhile, but the Rain Dance Conference might be something you want to consider. And you can go to the LMA P3 and then the LASSO conference. And then please don't miss our next webinar, How to Be Your Own PR Firm. That's going to be May 13th. This is one of our most well-attended webinars last year, and we're going to be doing it again for version 2.0. So thank you very much for listening today. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please give me an email, berman@berbay.com. Thanks a lot. Bye.